Captain stared at the rejection notice glowing on his personal tablet, the words blurring together as exhaustion weighed down his eyelids. Another cargo contract. Another opportunity slipped away like sand through his fingers. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but he couldn't bring himself to care. The stellar wanderer groaned softly around him, the old freighter's hull settling with the familiar sounds of aging metal and worn components. She wasn't much to look at anymore, but she had been his home for 15 years, ever since he'd scraped together enough credits to buy her from a scrap dealer on station. Rubbed his weathered face with calloused hands. 53 years old, and what did he have to show for it? A ship that needed constant repairs he couldn't afford, mounting debts that grew larger each month, and a reputation that had been slowly crumbling ever since the incident 2 years ago. It wasn't his fault that the automated cargo bay had malfunctioned, spilling half a shipment of rare minerals into space, but try explaining that to insurance investigators who had already made up their minds. The communications array chimed, indicating an incoming transmission. Almost ignored it, expecting another creditor or another rejection, but something made him reach for the controls. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a face that made him sit up in his captain's chair. She was stunning in a way that transcended species barriers. Her features were humanoid but refined, with high cheekbones and large eyes that seemed to shift color between gold and amber. What truly caught his attention were the small, iridescent scales that traced delicate patterns along her temples and the elegant horns that curved back from her forehead. Her hair fell in waves of deep crimson, and when she spoke, her voice carried a melodic quality that seemed to resonate in his bones. Captain of the vessel Stellar Wanderer, I am Princess of the Draconic Sovereignty. I have urgent need of passage to the neutral zones beyond the Veil Nebula. I am prepared to offer substantial compensation for this service. Blinked, certain he was hallucinating from lack of sleep. The Draconic Sovereignty was real enough, a powerful empire that controlled several star systems in the Outer Rim, but their representatives didn't typically contact down-on-their-luck human cargo haulers, and they certainly didn't look like royalty seeking passage on rust buckets. I'm sorry, Your Highness, but I think you might have the wrong ship. I'm just a freight hauler and not a very successful one lately. You'd probably want something more suited to diplomatic transport. Princess' expression shifted, revealing something that might have been desperation beneath her composed exterior. Captain, I have researched your vessel extensively. The Stellar Wanderer has several qualities that make her uniquely suited to my needs. She is small enough to avoid detection by larger patrol vessels. Her registration shows a clean record with minimal imperial entanglements. And most importantly, you have a reputation for completing contracts regardless of circumstances. That reputation might be a bit outdated, said with a bitter laugh. I haven't had a paying job in 6 weeks. Which is precisely why this arrangement could benefit us both. The princess leaned forward and caught a glimpse of more scales along her neck, these ones seeming to shimmer with their own internal light. I offer 2 million credits, paid in advance, for safe passage to coordinates I will provide once we are. Nearly fell out of his chair. 2 million credits would not only clear his debts, but give him enough to properly repair the Wanderer and maybe even upgrade some of her systems. It was more money than he'd seen in his entire career. What's the catch? He asked, because there was always a catch when something seemed too good to be true. Princess hesitated for a moment before responding. I am traveling without the knowledge or approval of the Sovereignty Council. There may be pursuit vessels that attempt to intercept us. I require a captain who will not abandon the contract when faced with complications. Studied her face, nodding the way her jaw tightened when she mentioned pursuit vessels. Whatever was driving her to leave her home in secret, it was serious enough that she was willing to risk traveling with a stranger through dangerous space. The smart thing would be to decline politely and wait for a safer opportunity. But 2 million credits was 2 million credits, and had been making bad decisions for so long that one more hardly seemed to matter. When do you need to depart? He asked. Relief flickered across the princess's features. Immediately, if possible. I am currently aboard a civilian transport approaching your current position at Freeport Station. I can transfer to your vessel within the hour. Looked around the Wanderer's bridge, taking in the patched panels, the flickering displays, and the general air of barely controlled decay. It wasn't exactly fitting accommodations for royalty, but if she was desperate enough to contact him, she probably wasn't expecting luxury. I'll need half the payment up front to cover docking fees and supplies, he said. And I'll need to know what we're likely to be running from. I don't like surprises. The advance payment will transfer immediately upon your acceptance, Princess replied. As for pursuit, we may encounter vessels from both the Draconic Sovereignty and the Galactic Trade Federation. I cannot provide more specific details until we are away from station monitoring systems. Nodded slowly. The Trade Federation's involvement suggested this was about more than just family politics, but he'd dealt with Federation patrol ships before. They were bureaucratic and predictable, unlike some of the more aggressive military forces in the galaxy. All right, Your Highness. Welcome aboard the Stellar Wanderer. Fair warning, though, she's not the most comfortable ship in the fleet. The environmental systems are temperamental, the gravity generator has a tendency to fluctuate, and the food synthesizer hasn't worked properly in 3 years. I am not concerned with comfort, Captain. I am concerned with survival. The transmission ended, leaving alone with his thoughts and the sudden weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He pulled up the ship's system's diagnostics, wincing at the long list of yellow and red indicators that marked various components operating at suboptimal levels. The Wanderer could make the journey, but it would require careful navigation and probably more luck than he'd had in recent years. His personal account chimed with an incoming credit transfer and stared at the number in disbelief. 1 million credits, just as promised. He hadn't seen his account balance that high since, well, ever. The next hour passed in a blur of activity as prepared the ship for departure. He ran diagnostics on the faster-than-light drive, checked the navigation computers, and made sure the life support systems were functioning within acceptable parameters. The cargo bay was empty except for a few crates of personal supplies, but that would work in their favor if they needed to make quick course corrections or emergency maneuvers. The airlock chimed as Princess Transport docked with the Wanderer, made his way to the entry bay, pausing to check his appearance in a reflective panel. His graying hair was disheveled, his uniform was rumpled, and he probably smelled like recycled air and desperation. Not exactly the image of a competent starship captain, but it was too late to change that now. The airlock cycled through its sequence, and Princess stepped aboard the Stellar Wanderer. She was smaller than he'd expected, barely reaching his shoulder, but she carried herself with a regal bearing that made her seem taller. She wore practical traveling clothes in deep blue and silver, with a cloak that seemed to shimmer like dragon scales in the corridor lighting. A single piece of luggage floated behind her on a platform. "Captain," she said, inclining her head in a gesture of respect, "thank you for accepting my contract." "Thank you for the advance payment," replied. "Let me show you to the passenger quarters such as they are." He led her through the ship's narrow corridors, pointing out the basic facilities and emergency equipment locations. The passenger cabin was small and furnished, with a single bunk, a tiny desk, and a porthole that looked out at the stars. It was clean, at least, though that was about the best that could be said for it. Princess examined the space with apparent satisfaction. "This will be adequate. When can we depart?" "As soon as you provide me with our destination coordinates," said. "I've already filed a departure request with station control." She activated a small device from her luggage, and his personal tablet chimed with an incoming data packet. Reviewed the coordinates, frowning as he realized their destination was deep in unclaimed space, far from any established shipping lanes or colonies. "This is pretty remote," he observed. "What's out there?" "Safety," Princess replied simply. "There are resources that I need to access, resources that certain parties would prefer remained hidden." Decided not to press for more details. He'd learned over the years that passengers who paid well were entitled to their privacy, especially when they were paying as well as this one. They made their way to the bridge, where began the departure sequence. Freeport Station's traffic control granted clearance without question, and the Stellar Wanderer disengaged from her docking clamps with a series of mechanical clanks that echoed through the hull. As they cleared the station's traffic zone and prepared to engage the FTL drive, Princess stood beside the captain's chair, watching the stars wheel past the viewports. "Captain," she said quietly, "there is something else you should know. The nature of my departure from Sovereignty space may have complications for your future interactions with my people." Glanced at her, nodding the way her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. "What kind of complications?" "If we are captured, you will likely be charged with kidnapping a member of the royal family. The penalties for such crimes are severe." And if we're not captured? Princess turned to meet his gaze, and for a moment saw something ancient and powerful looking back at him from her golden eyes. Then perhaps we both find something we thought we had lost. The FTL drive engaged with a low thrumming that vibrated through the ship's frame, and the stars stretched into lines as the stellar wanderer leaped into hyperspace. Whatever lay ahead, there was no turning back now. Settled back in his captain's chair, watching the swirling patterns of hyperspace dance across the viewports. For the first time in months, he felt something approaching optimism. Maybe his luck was finally changing. Maybe this strange contract would be the beginning of something better. He had no way of knowing that their journey would transform not just his fortunes, but his understanding of what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors beyond imagination. 3 days into their journey through hyperspace, discovered that traveling with a dragon princess was nothing like he had imagined. Princess proved to be remarkably adaptable to shipboard life, helping with routine maintenance and even learning to operate some of the Stellar Wanderer's more temperamental systems. She had an intuitive understanding of technology that impressed him, often suggesting solutions to problems he'd been wrestling with for years. What surprised him most was her genuine curiosity about human culture and customs. During their shared meals, she asked countless questions about Earth history, human art, and the philosophical differences between species. In return, she shared stories of the draconic sovereignty that painted a picture of a civilization far more complex and nuanced than the aggressive empire portrayed in human media. "Your people have a remarkable capacity for adaptation," she observed one evening as they sat in the small galley, sharing a dinner of synthesized protein and vitamin supplements. "Most species, when faced with the vastness of space, either retreat into isolation or attempt to impose their own order on everything they encounter. Humans seem to find a third path, embracing change while maintaining their essential nature." Paused in his eating, considering her words. "I'm not sure we have much choice in the matter. Humans have always been wanderers. Even before we reached the stars, we were spreading across our planet, adapting to new environments, learning from other cultures. Maybe that's just who we are." "Perhaps," Princess said, her golden eyes thoughtful. "But it is a rare quality. The draconic sovereignty has remained largely unchanged for we value tradition, hierarchy, the preservation of ancient ways. It has made us strong, but perhaps inflexible." Before could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began blaring. He rushed to the bridge, Princess close behind, and quickly brought up the sensor displays. 3 vessels had dropped out of hyperspace nearby, their energy signatures marking them as military-grade ships from the draconic sovereignty. "Civilian vessel Stellar Wanderer, this is commander of the sovereignty cruiser Crimson Talon. You will drop out of hyperspace immediately and prepare for boarding. You are harboring a fugitive from sovereignty justice." Looked at Princess, who had gone very still beside him. Her scales seemed to darken, and he could have sworn he felt the temperature in the bridge rise by several degrees. "They found us sooner than I expected," she said quietly. "Commander is my cousin, son of my father's brother. He is persistent." "Any chance we can outrun them?" asked, though he already knew the answer. The Stellar Wanderer was a tough old bird, but she was built for cargo hauling, not speed. "In normal space, no, but there may be another option." Princess moved to the navigation console, her fingers dancing over the controls with practiced ease. "I can guide us through a section of the Veil Nebula that most pilots avoid. The gravitational anomalies make it dangerous, but my people have ancient charts of safe passage routes." The communication system crackled again. "Princess, I know you can hear me. The Council has issued a formal recall order. Return with us now, and this incident will be forgotten. Continue to resist, and Captain will be charged as an accomplice to your crimes." Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. He'd known there would be risks, but the reality of facing down sovereignty warships was making those risks very concrete. "What crimes?" he asked. Princess' jaw tightened. "I took something that belongs to my people, something that I believe could change the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy. The Council disagrees with my assessment." "What kind of something?" Instead of answering directly, Princess activated her personal storage device. A holographic display materialized above the console, showing what appeared to be a crystalline artifact covered in intricate symbols that seemed to shift and move when tried to focus on them. "This is the heart of stars," she said. one of 7 artifacts created by the ancients before they vanished from our galaxy. My people have guarded it for thousands of years, using it only in times of dire need. But the Council has become complacent, content to hoard power rather than use it to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Studied the hologram, feeling an odd tingling sensation in his mind when he looked at the shifting symbols. What does it do? It amplifies natural abilities and allows the user to interface directly with advanced technology. For my people, it can enhance our fire breath, our telepathic capabilities, our physical strength. But it was never meant for dragons alone. The ancients created it to be used by any sentient species in times of great need. The implications hit like a physical blow. You're talking about a weapon. I am talking about hope, Princess corrected. The Trade Federation has been systematically subjugating smaller civilizations, using economic pressure and military force to expand their territory. The Council believes this is none of our concern, that the sovereignty should remain neutral as long as our own borders are secure. I believe they are wrong. The proximity alarms grew more insistent as the sovereignty ships moved closer. Could see them on the visual display now, sleek predatory shapes that dwarfed his humble freighter. Each one carried enough firepower to reduce the Stellar Wanderer to scrap metal in seconds. "Princess," came Commander's voice again, "you have 30 seconds to respond before we take more direct action. Do not force me to fire upon a civilian vessel." Looked at Princess, seeing the conflict in her eyes. She was weighing the risk to his life against whatever mission had driven her to steal one of her people's most precious artifacts. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "I signed on to transport you safely to your destination. That contract is still in effect unless you want to release me from it." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Captain, they could destroy your ship." "They could try," replied, settling into his captain's chair with grim determination. "But I've been flying through dangerous space for 15 years, and I've never failed to complete a contract yet. Besides," he added with a slight grin, "you haven't paid me the second half of my fee. I can't let you get captured before I collect." Princess stared at him for a moment, then suddenly smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be entirely human. "You are quite remarkable, Captain." "I'm probably just stupid," muttered, engaging the ship's evasive maneuvering systems. "But let's see how good these ancient charts of yours really are." The next few minutes were among the most terrifying of his career. Princess guided them into the Veil Nebula, navigating between gravitational anomalies that could have torn the ship apart if they'd made even small navigation errors. Behind them, the sovereignty ships followed, but their larger size and greater mass made them more vulnerable to the nebula's treacherous conditions. The Stellar Wanderer shook and groaned as gravitational fields twisted space around them, but she held together through sheer determination and intimate knowledge of her capabilities. Gradually, the pursuing ships fell behind, forced to reduce speed as the nebula's dangers mounted. "There," Princess said, pointing to a region of space where the nebula's gas clouds seemed to part like curtains. "The Sanctuary of Echoes. My people discovered it centuries ago but kept its location secret. We should be safe there while we plan our next move." Guided the ship through the gap in the nebula, emerging into a pocket of clear space dominated by an ancient space station of obvious alien construction. The structure was massive, easily 10 times the size of Freeport Station, but it showed clear signs of age and abandonment. "Ancient technology?" asked. "Indeed. This station is over 50,000 years old, built by the same race that created the Heart of Stars. The draconic sovereignty has maintained it as a neutral meeting ground for diplomatic negotiations, but it has not been used for that purpose in decades." As they approached the station, detected power signatures indicating that basic life support and docking systems were still functional. Whoever had built this place had constructed it to last. "We can resupply here and make repairs to your ship," Princess continued. "The station's databases contain star charts and information that could help us reach our destination without further interference." Brought the Stellar Wanderer alongside one of the station's docking bays, feeling the familiar clunk of magnetic clamps engaging. Through the viewports, he could see the ancient corridors stretching away into darkness, lit by strips of bioluminescent material that pulsed with a soft blue glow. "What exactly are we trying to reach?" he asked. "You mentioned coordinates in unclaimed space, but that's a pretty big area." Princess was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on something beyond the viewports. "There is a world," she said finally. "A planet that was once home to a thriving civilization, but was abandoned when its star began to die. Recent surveys have suggested that the planet may still be habitable, hidden within an artificial environmental bubble created by the same technology that built this station." "And you think this Heart of Stars artifact belongs there?" "I think it belongs wherever it can do the most good. The planet I speak of has become a refuge for those fleeing Federation expansion. Displaced peoples, species whose have been strip-mined or conquered, survivors of conflicts that the major powers prefer to ignore. They have built a new society there, one based on cooperation rather than domination." Was beginning to understand the scope of what Princess was attempting. "You're not just stealing an artifact, you're starting a revolution." "I am trying to give hope to those who have none," she corrected. "The galaxy is changing, Captain. The old alliances are breaking down, and the strong are preying upon the weak with increasing boldness. Someone must stand for those who cannot stand for themselves." As they prepared to explore the ancient station, found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about his passenger. Princess was not just fleeing her home. She was carrying the weight of countless lives on her shoulders, trying to forge a new path in a galaxy that seemed increasingly hostile to ideals like justice and compassion. "Well," he said, checking his sidearm and activating the airlock controls, "I guess we'd better make sure you get where you're going." The ancient station revealed its secrets slowly, like a flower blooming in reverse. Princess led through corridors that hummed with barely understood technology, her scales glowing softly in response to energy fields that had been dormant for. The station's artificial intelligence, when they finally managed to establish contact, spoke in harmonics that made teeth ache but seemed to resonate perfectly with draconic heritage. "The archives confirm what I suspected," she said as they stood before a massive holographic display that showed star charts spanning half the galaxy. "The world we seek, Sanctuary Prime, is not just a refugee planet. It is the last repository of ancient technology outside of the major powers' control, if the Federation discovers its location. They'll either destroy it or claim it for themselves," finished. He studied the navigation data the station's systems had provided, noting the complex route required to reach their destination without triggering automated monitoring systems. "This is going to take us through some very unfriendly space." "Which is why I needed a captain with your particular skills," Princess said. "The major shipping lines would never attempt such a journey, but independent operators like yourself have a reputation for finding ways through impossible situations." Felt a flush of pride at her words, though he tried not to let it show. "Speaking of impossible situations, we're going to need more than just navigation data to get through Federation patrol zones. This station wouldn't happen to have any defensive upgrades we could borrow, would it?" Princess' eyes lit up with something that might have been mischief. "As a matter of fact, it does. The ancients were remarkably generous in their preparations for future visitors." The next several hours were spent installing technology that could barely comprehend onto his humble cargo hauler. The station's automated systems seemed eager to help, extending mechanical appendages that moved with fluid precision to attach devices that hummed with barely contained energy. When they were finished, the stellar wanderer looked much the same from the outside, but her internal systems had been transformed. "Adaptive shielding that adjusts to different weapon types," Princess explained as she ran through the new systems with obvious delight. "Enhanced faster-than-light capabilities that will allow us to make smaller jumps with greater precision. And most importantly, a cloaking system that should render us invisible to most standard sensors." Ran his hands over the new control panels, marveling at their elegant design. "This technology must be worth more than my entire ship." "The ancients believed that knowledge should be shared freely among all sentient species," Princess replied. "They built these stations as gifts to the future, hoping that their technology would be used wisely when the need arose." "And you think the need has arisen?" Princess was quiet for a moment, her golden eyes reflecting the soft glow of the new instruments. "I believe we are approaching a crossroads, Captain. The actions we take in the coming days will determine whether this galaxy becomes a place of cooperation and growth, or whether it descends into an age of conquest and subjugation." They departed the station 12 hours later, the stellar wanderer moving with a smoothness and precision that had never experienced before. The ancient technology integrated seamlessly with his ship's existing systems, as if it had been designed specifically for this purpose. Perhaps, in some cosmic sense, it had been. Their journey to Sanctuary Prime took them through 7 different star systems, each requiring careful navigation to avoid both Federation patrols and the increasingly frequent Sovereignty search vessels that seemed to be expanding their hunt beyond their own territory. The new cloaking system proved its worth repeatedly, allowing them to slip past detection grids that should have been impossible to penetrate. Along the way, learned more about his passenger than he had expected. Princess was not just royal by birth. She was a scholar, an engineer, and a philosopher who had spent decades studying the ancient artifacts in her people's possession. Her decision to steal the Heart of Stars had not been made lightly, but represented the culmination of years of research and growing conviction that her people's isolationist policies were morally indefensible. "My father ruled with wisdom and compassion," she told him during one of their long conversations in hyperspace. "But the council that succeeded him after his death has forgotten that power exists to serve others, not itself. They see the Heart of Stars as a symbol of our superiority, proof that we are destined to rule. I see it as a tool that could help heal the wounds this galaxy has suffered." "And you're willing to be branded a traitor for that belief." Princess' smile was sad but determined. "I would rather be a traitor to my people's fear than a party to their indifference." When they finally reached the edge of the sanctuary system, was shocked by what they found. The dying star that dominated the system still burned, but with a strange, artificial regularity that suggested massive technological intervention. Around it, a sphere of crystalline structures reflected and channeled the star's energy, creating a network of power distribution that boggled the mind. "The ancients did not merely build shelters," Princess breathed, staring at the displays in wonder. "They built a new form of stellar engineering. That star should have gone supernova ago, but they have stabilized it, turned it into a power source that could sustain civilization for millions of years." Sanctuary Prime itself was a world transformed. Where orbital scans had suggested a barely habitable planet, they found instead a globe covered in gleaming cities connected by transport networks that conventional physics. The population readings suggested over 50 million inhabitants representing dozens of different species, all living in apparent harmony. "Incoming transmission," announced as his communications board lit up with activity. "Looks like they know we're here." The face that appeared on their main display was unlike anything had seen before. The being who greeted them seemed to be a fusion of organic and mechanical components, with features that shifted between different species' characteristics, as if they were sampling from multiple genetic templates. "Welcome to Sanctuary Prime," the being said in a voice that harmonized with itself in impossible ways. "I am Synthesis, the coordinating intelligence of this world's governing council. Princess of the Draconic Sovereignty, we have been expecting you." Glanced at his passenger, who looked as surprised as he felt. "Expecting us?" "The ancient monitoring stations detected your approach to there," Synthesis explained. "We have been following your journey with great interest. The artifact you carry has been calling to its siblings for some time now." "Siblings?" Princess leaned forward, her eyes wide with understanding. "The other hearts, they're here." 5 of the 7 Hearts of Stars now reside on Sanctuary Prime, brought here by refugees and scholars who recognized their true purpose. With your arrival, we will possess 6 of the 7 artifacts, enough, perhaps, to begin the work the ancients intended. The next few hours passed in a blur of guided tour, technical briefings, and introductions to beings that would have thought impossible just weeks before. Sanctuary Prime was not just a refugee planet. It was a living laboratory where dozens of species worked together to unlock the secrets of ancient technology. The Hearts of Stars, when brought together, created a resonance field that amplified not just individual abilities, but the capacity for cooperation and understanding between different forms of consciousness. "This is what the ancients envisioned," Princess said, as they stood in the central chamber where the 5 hearts hung suspended in crystalline matrices, their light pulsing in complex harmonies. "Not domination by any single species, but synthesis, the creation of something greater than the sum of its parts." Watched the interplay of energies around the artifacts, feeling something shift in his understanding of the galaxy's history. And the Federation and the Sovereignty would destroy all of this if they knew it existed. "They would try," agreed Synthesis, their form shifting to incorporate aspects of its own appearance in a gesture of respect. But they would fail because they cannot comprehend what they would be fighting. How do you conquer a civilization that exists beyond the limitations of individual identity? How do you subjugate beings who have transcended the need for competition? The ceremony that followed was unlike anything from experience or imagination. Princess approached the heart of stars she had carried across the galaxy, but instead of simply adding it to the collection, she gestured for to join her. The ancients' records are clear, she said. The hearts respond not just to individual will, but to bonds of trust and mutual respect. You have proven yourself worthy, Captain. You risked everything to help someone you barely knew, asking nothing in return but fair payment for fair service. That is the essence of what the ancients valued above all else. Hesitated, feeling unworthy of such an honor. I'm just a cargo hauler, Your Highness. I don't have any special abilities or noble blood. You have something more valuable than either, Princess replied. You have the courage to do what is right, even when it costs you everything. That is the most human quality of all, and perhaps the most important. When finally placed his hand on the heart of stars alongside Princess, the sensation was indescribable. For a moment, he felt connected not just to the artifact and its siblings, but to every consciousness on Sanctuary Prime, and beyond that to a vast network of awareness that spanned the galaxy. He understood with crystal clarity that the choice facing their civilization was not between different forms of government or economic systems, but between isolation and connection, between fear and hope, between the narrow pursuit of individual advantage and the broader dream of collective flourishing. The vision that filled his mind showed him possible futures, worlds where ancient technology had been used to heal damaged ecosystems, space stations where a dozen species worked together to explore the mysteries of the universe, children of all races learning and playing together without thought for the boundaries that divided their parents. It was a galaxy where humanity's gift for adaptation and cooperation could flourish alongside the unique strengths of every other sentient species. When the connection faded, found himself changed in ways he could not yet fully understand. The Stellar Wanderer was still his ship, but she was also something more now, upgraded not just with ancient technology but with a deeper purpose. He was still captain, but he was also part of something larger than himself, a growing network of beings committed to protecting and nurturing the dream of a better galaxy. So what happens now? He asked as they prepared to leave Sanctuary Prime, the Stellar Wanderer's cargo bay now filled with supplies and equipment for the journey ahead. Now we plant seeds, Princess replied, her scales shimmering with new patterns of light that reflected her connection to the hearts. We visit worlds that need hope, species that have given up on the possibility of change. We show them that cooperation is not just an ideal but a practical reality. And gradually, choice by choice, we help build the galaxy the ancients envisioned. Smiled as he settled into his captain's chair, feeling the ship respond to his commands with newfound eagerness. His life was far from finished. In many ways, it was just beginning. The lonely cargo hauler who had accepted a desperate princess's contract was gone, replaced by someone with a purpose that stretched across the stars. As the Stellar Wanderer leaped into hyperspace, carrying her crew toward their first mission as ambassadors of hope, reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He had believed his story was ending, but instead, he had discovered that it was merely the prologue to something far grander than he had ever imagined possible. Behind them, Sanctuary Prime continued its patient work of transformation, while ahead lay a galaxy full of possibilities waiting to be explored.